My name is Iris Ng. I shot a series called Hey Lady, and it's directed by Sarah Polly, Adriana Maggs, and Will Bose. I do have a background in documentary. I've been wanting to do a little bit more scripted, just to create a little bit more balance in my life. And producers and directors approached me about this show, I guess because part of it required a naturalistic look. That's something I specialize in. So we shot this as one big project that gets split up according to location. So each director had maybe a day or 2 or 3 that they would be directing, which might have consisted of 3 locations, and each of those locations might appear in the series. It's a series made up of 8 5-minute episodes, which centers upon this 75-year-old woman named Lady, who sort of in her life loses agency with the people around her, her family, but regains that agency by exhibiting control over the filmmaking process. So she knows that there is a series being made about her. She talks about it. We are the only ones that are let into that world of hers, but we're very much part of it. And that was kind of fun. There was something about breaking that fourth wall that's interesting to me. Having worked on some documentaries that do that and are truthful in that way, I like that tension. So this was interesting to me for that reason. Shooting this scripted piece was definitely more similar to documentary than I thought it would be. Some preconceptions I had about shooting scripted were sort of blown out of the water, or they were the opposite of what I thought. So I thought that I would have an operator and I'd be looking at a monitor and I wouldn't be carrying a camera on my shoulder for the entirety of a film. I was required to operate, which I actually love. And it's hard to imagine even being next to a monitor and not being where the action is. And I very much love being in the moment with the people in front of the camera. I'm not looking for necessarily a lot of cutaways, but to understand the situation the way that one might encounter it in real life. So using lenses that reflect our normal perspective and not trying to obtain anything optically. So not getting too tight or getting too close to anybody by way of optics, but actually just being sort of a human. And the way that we conceptualize the handheld cameras of the show, I mean, I try to think about whose gaze is it behind the camera whenever I shoot anything. So this question came up when we were discussing the look, and I asked who this camera is that's with Lady all the time, and I think Adriana said it. I just think it's somebody that really cares about her. Thinking about what the piece is ideally trying to communicate is always a goal, and figuring out how that translates into a visual language and what lenses to use is always a question that we try to answer before we start shooting. Maybe it becomes more fixed when you have a script, of course, and you're not finding the story in the editing, and you're not finding it in the events that unfold. We shot on the Alexa Mini with a full set of Cooke S4s from Kessil Camera. In the Cooke S4 set, there are a lot of increments, there are a lot of focal lengths, and we relied mostly on the mid-range. So the 25s, the 32s, and even the 27s sometimes. I think that really came in handy, and the 40s, that sort of range. So sort of a human perspective of what you might see as you'd encounter the world, as opposed to getting optically very close or seeing a very wide perspective. Pre-production was technically 2 weeks. The shoot was only 9 days, but we had a full 2 weeks of prep, except that the directors and I started probably a week before that. So prep was actually longer than the production itself, and it was all very necessary to do. Also because a lot of the locations weren't determined yet by the time we started shooting. So that gives us a motivation to choose lenses, angles, and to encounter people in the world the way Lady might encounter them in real life. My gaffer, Edwin Lau, has his own package, which was very handy for this. It was something that we could work very quickly with. He had his own truck. And so it was mainly a lot of daylight-based lighting, sky panels, a lot of light mats, and a bunch of quasars as well. We didn't have the luxury of studios where we can consolidate our lighting and our setups and all that. So it is a little bit like the documentary work I do, in that we're moving around a lot and using real locations and augmenting natural light. And we just wanted to make it look like it was unfolding as a normal day would, except for the fact that we are we are jumping back and forth between a lot of locations. How we stayed mobile for the 20 locations that we shot in 9 days was a lot of collaboration and planning, but so much of it was about the tech scout. And I think if we hadn't done that, and if I hadn't gone with my gaffer to every location and discussed the possibilities and just a rough plan to work with, which can always change, of course, but just to looping everybody into the process of the different directors. I had worked with them extensively in prep, so it was a very collaborative process. We were always checking in with each other to make sure we were all on board with the approach. And with them having very different backgrounds, each of them, sometimes it was a challenge to come to a consensus about that, but through extensive discussions and meetings, we did come to sort of a template for how we were going to approach this. So there's a moment where I was operating, and it just felt right to hold on the action. And the moment and the action in the script had long passed, but we just kept rolling. And the director was on board. I think we might have glanced at each other. The actor was on board to keep going. And we all just decided that this moment was going to continue, and we were all interested to see how it was going to evolve. So there's a little bit of improvisation in front of the camera and also behind it. And that was really invigorating. And that's something that I love about shooting documentaries, is the moment is not written. And there was a moment where I could feel that in the scripted piece as well.